sunlit days, one thing stays the same.
Gradually, instead of a little tiny cluster, we now have 10 million women backing this particular measure before Congress. That's 10 million women who've united through their organizations.
Swim and hold you, but look into the lake, shimmering like smoke, rises the moon. Oh, close your weary eyes. I promise you that soon the autumn comes to darken fading summer skies. Breathe, breathe, breathe.
In America, women are known to be the primary caregivers in the family. They had to clean, cook, and care for the children. While men are the breadwinners in the family, it is a woman's responsibility to make sure the men are happy. They were chastised for their accomplishments and were constantly compared to their husbands, fathers, brothers, or sons. During the late 18th century, women were made to be the educators of young men in order to teach them how to be competent citizens of the United States and embody the Enlightenment ideals that propelled republicanism after the American Revolution, which was known as Republican motherhood.
At the end of the war, what is obvious is that the old colonial idea that women's brains are weak and they're incapable of making political choices or moral choices, rational decisions, is obviously not true. Women have taken sides in the American Revolution, they've made sacrifices, they've risked their life, and it's obvious that they have acted on political loyalties. So when the war is over, the question becomes, so where do they fit into the republic? So it's not as if after the revolution, the leaders of the country are going to say, ladies, you were so good, we're going to make you citizens, and would you like to run for office? They do begin to think that women can play what they call a civic role in the new republic. Next generation of men have to prove to be good patriots. And here is what women can do. Women can raise patriotic sons. Being a good mother becomes a political act. Republican motherhood, which is what they call it, not as in the Republican Party, but the Republic, suggests that every time a mother tells her son, you must be willing to sacrifice for your country. You must believe in your authority in society, that they are doing something that is political. It doesn't mean they have economic independence. It doesn't mean they have political rights themselves. It doesn't mean that they leave the household. But it means that what they do in the household has a civic component.
And a century later, in the late 19th century, there is the famous cult of domesticity, which was created to limit the powers and influence women had in their families, and served as a societal standard of women, in which they were supposed to be submissive to their male counterparts and be the perfect trophy wife.
The cult of domesticity, which is an idealized vision of women that grows out of the 1800s pursuit of perfection. It is an idea that I think I can encompass just by pointing to one concept, the lady, right? We're going to have the lady become a thing. And what does that mean? If you were of a good family, then you would be the lady of the house, and you would take care of everything domestic within a very private, albeit fairly tightly bound gender sphere, okay? And you're going to be viewed as morally pious. You're going to be, in many ways, better than men because you are innocent and good and decent, and you are going to build on concepts of Republican motherhood as you teach your children how to be good patriots and know the things that they need to know for self-government and that kind of thing.
Women's voices have been silenced for many years by men in positions of power, and despite how degrading and disgusting those standards were, this has not stopped women from fighting for their rights. Women have fought for their rights for centuries and decades, from the late 1700s with Phyllis Wheatley to the beginning of the women's rights movement in the mid-19th century. Women continue to fight for their rights in the 21st century in America, against the abortion law, wage gaps, violence towards women, for gender equality, and so on.
The court split 7-2 with Justices Byron White and William Rehnquist dissenting. The 9 justices made abortion largely a private matter.
January 22nd, 1973 would be an historic day.
There's a certain sense in which Roe v. Wade was a bolt out of the blue. The Supreme Court had never before even vaguely suggested that restrictions on abortion were constitutionally suspect.
Many people are conflicted when it comes to the discussion of abortions. As this topic progressed to become a bigger deal in the 21st century, 2 opposing camps emerged. One side is known as pro-life, and they were against abortions because they believe that fetuses are living humans who should not be punished for the mistakes of their conception.
Why is it so important for you to be out here?
Because the babies don't have any representative.
The Bible said God knew me before I was in the womb. We are absolutely destroying God's creation when we have an abortion. It's sad.
The other side is known as pro-choice, with their motto being "My body, my choice." And many of them do not want to have a child in the current state of America due to the insensual conception, rape conception, and not being financially stable enough to have a child, and so on.
How can you be pro-life but force a rape victim to have her rapist baby? How can you be pro-life and force a young girl to become a mother before she can even get her driver's license?
Despite the fact that women have been allowed to have abortions since 1973 and the 14th Amendment, people continue to protest. The Roe v. Wade report case had been the deciding factor of the allowance for women to have abortions. The 66-page report showcased how Jane Roe, a pregnant single mother who did not want to be a mother, challenged a Doe family who was unable to conceive children, and how she and countless other women from the working class and poor class should be able to get an abortion without the reasons of how dangerous the fetus will be to them. While this case was first argued on December 13, 1971, it was re-argued on October 11, 1972, and finally decided in favor of Roe on January 22, 1973. On September 1, 2021, the state of Texas passed a law that made it illegal for women to have abortions after 6 weeks of their pregnancy. This infuriated women in America because studies have shown that most women don't even realize they're pregnant until they're 9 weeks into their conception or 12 weeks after their menstruation cycle has stopped. This also violates the 14th Amendment and women's rights, but government officials in Texas have managed to get around it. Despite fighting against the abortion law and taking it to the Supreme Court, the Texas abortion law remains in effect. The Equal Pay Act of 1963 was signed by John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States of America, allowing men and women to earn the same amount of money within their respective career pools. He issued an executive order prohibiting gender discrimination in civil service. Nevertheless, despite signing this act, gender-based discrimination persists and is practiced in STEM, corporate, and other fields of career paths. Those career paths frequently thrive on discouraging wage discussions and pay women less than men when they are supposed to rely on salary history, experience, and compensation decisions. Although there have been women who have broken down the barriers and shown everybody that they can do the same things as men, only a small percentage of them were capable of doing so. Societal sexism frequently influences women's career choices and forces women to work in majority of caregiving, sexualized and degrading jobs. It is frequently depicted in films and television shows how women who want to pursue a STEM or corporate career must be degraded into the hot and sexy secretary role or allegedly slept with the higher-ups in order to obtain their positions. Women are frequently fantasized by their male coworkers and view them as their sexual fantasies rather than viewing them as their equals or their higher-ups.
My name is Natalie Doster Gibson. Middle name is Doster. Last name Gibson, Gipson. I chose my career kind of by accident, but it definitely was divine purpose. I was in college, Cal State Dominguez, studying finance, and I was on a long-term plan to graduate. So actually, I didn't graduate in 4 years, but I was finishing up college. I had changed my major from accounting to finance, so that added additional courses for me to take. And I took a job working for the city of Los Angeles, LAPD, in their jail. LAPD has their own jail that hold arrestees until they're transferred to the county of Los Angeles jail system. And while working that job for about a year, I was around arrestees every day and around officers every day who brought their arrestees into the jail. So 2 officers, a couple of them, maybe 4, had started talking to me about considering a career in law enforcement. I told them, no way, I wanted to work in finance. I'm just temporarily doing this job. They said, well, you are so smart. You really handle yourself very mature, and I think you'd be a great officer. I said, I don't think so. They brought me a flyer a week or 2 later. They had this big promotion to hire women in law enforcement. They were like, women in law enforcement, please join. This is in the late 80s. I saw the flyer. The date was coming up. I told them I would go to the workshop. Lo and behold, while at the workshop, they gave us an overview. They told us a starting salary, which was fantastic. They said, if you have a degree, you're going to get even more money. I say, wow. And they just made it seem so fun. Like I would be fun, doing things meaningful, have fun, and getting paid. I said, what a noble profession. I can help people and get paid. So I decided to join LAPD as a career and ended up staying for 30 years.
Throughout your career, how can you address the high rates of sexual violence towards women?
Well, when you talk about sexual violence, I look at it as inappropriate comments and sexual nature. I also look at it as sexual harassment, men trying to ask women out or take advantage of women in positions. They may be in position of authority. So yes, I did experience some sexual harassment, but I was never the victim of sexual violence. For me, violence is a sexual assault, attacking a woman, physically raping a woman. So I've never seen that or know anyone personally who's been the victim of violence, but harassment, yes. I too was the victim of sexual harassment twice in my career that I'm aware of. So once was on probation when I started my career in law enforcement. My training officer, so that first year and a half we're in training, my training officer made inappropriate comments to me that he wanted to take me out, and if I didn't go out with him, he would spread rumors that I was going out with him anyway. I told him, tried to be nice and say, I'm not interested. Please stop talking to me in this fashion. Can we just focus on the job? I really tried to be nice because I didn't want to draw a lot of attention to the situation. It continued, and he gave me, and I continued to put down his advances and tell him I'm not interested. And it culminated when he gave me my evaluation. So as a rookie, you're evaluated in the beginning like every 2 weeks. So I was still in this every 2 week evaluation time period. And he rated me very lowly compared to a prior rating he had given me on officer safety and knowing the laws and how to conduct myself and communication skills. Well, now this rating was much lower than the prior rating because I was not taking up on him on his advances. And he hands it to me in the report writing room in front of other officers. And I looked at it and I told him, can I please talk to you in the hallway? And I stepped into the hallway and I said, you know that I work better than this and I refuse to sign this rating. I need you to rewrite it and give me a fair evaluation. And I walked away. Wow. He probably was shocked that I stood up to him in that fashion. Maybe other female rookies in a similar position to myself gave in to his advances because they thought that was the only way to keep their careers and jobs. He seemed very comfortable making advances to me, and I was shocked that he would even put himself in that position because my father was on the job, and he was on the job when this happened, and I didn't tell him purposely because I knew he would have been very irate and would have called the commanding officer and demanded.
Would have been something bigger than what you wanted.
Absolutely. He would have demanded an investigation or something, and I didn't want it to be that big. So I handled it my way. He rewrote my rating, and I'm blessed to say I was the last female probationary officer that he ever had to work with. He took a job working on our horse-mounted unit, thank God. So he got that job and stayed there till he retired. So I felt vindicated, like maybe me standing up to him helped, in some kind of way, and him taking that new job kind of made it better for other females behind me that I didn't have to report him to the officials, but I was just about to report him if he didn't change my rating. Wow. Another time I was sexually harassed was actually a peer who sat next to me every day in the detective squad room, barely said hello to me, but we went on a homicide convention. I was a homicide detective at one point in my career. And then he wanted to make these sexual advances toward me attending the homicide convention. I told him, I'm not interested in you. He touched my leg. I had pants on, and I grabbed his hand and said, don't you ever freaking touch me again. There were other male co-workers standing around. They intervened and kind of talked to him and moved him out of the way. But they went back and told our boss. When I returned from the convention, the boss asked me how everything went. The convention was great. He says, and what happened with Chuck? I said, sir, it's been handled and it's not a problem. And he kind of said, okay, if you need me to intervene, let me know. But I handled it. So I always have had a strong personality. I don't like people take advantage of me. I'm going to stand up for what's right. And I was able to handle those advances. But I know everyone doesn't have that personality. And that's why it's so pervasive. A lot of women feel that's their only way to get ahead, to keep a job. And I really want them to feel that they shouldn't feel like that. And then also men shouldn't cross those boundaries because it's wrong.
Did you see a wage gap between you and your male colleagues?
No, I did not. So when you work in civil service, like government type jobs or city jobs, the pay scale at that level is the same. There's no disparity in income. So what I was paid, my peers were paid, whether they're a male or female. I think the the pay disparity between men and women is more prevalent in the private sector. When you start going for corporate jobs, they want to pay men a lot more, and it's been documented. Men get paid a lot more in those professions than women do who have same degree or similar degrees. Thank you.
I'm here with Professor Lisa Liggins, and I'm going to be asking some questions. First question. If you had to describe America in the 21st century for women, what would it be?
Well, that's an amazing question. So America in the 21st century to me, as far as women's rights or as far as just in general?
As far as just in general.
In general, I would describe it as, let's see. I would describe it as moving forward with a lot of perspective change in sight. We are definitely moving forward from what we were in, let's just say back in the 60s and the 70s. So I wasn't even born in the 60s, but I was born in the 70s. And just from me being born from then until now, there's definitely some movement forward that I can see, but we still have a long way to go. However, with that movement forward, I can see things that are happening that are positive as we move forward.
Yes. Thank you. Second question. What is the difference between the rights for women now and the rights from the past?
So the rights, just without doing any real research on that question, I would think that the rights from women in the past, so let's see, prior to probably 1968, women weren't able to do a lot of things. We weren't allowed to do things. I'll say that. We weren't allowed, as Black women even, to vote, women in general. We weren't also allowed to or acknowledged as leadership, being in leadership, being able to be leaders, being able to lead men. So I would say the biggest difference is liberation. The biggest difference for me is that as a woman today, and me being an African American woman, I can actually see myself at the head of a country. You know, our amazing vice president is a woman, she's an African American woman, Kamala Harris, who prior to, the 1980s, 1990s, we would have never have heard of that, And so the biggest difference right now, I believe we've been liberated and we have a seat at the table and we are acknowledged as people who can actually lead rather than just women who are a part of something.
Do you think that men and women are equal now? Like have equal opportunities?
I don't believe we're equal now. I honestly don't believe we'll ever be equal. I believe that we will be able to be like a kind of same thing as my previous question. We'll be acknowledged, but I don't believe we'll ever be equal. And quite honestly, I don't think it's a thing where me personally, and I'm a Christian. I'm a Bible believing Christian. And the men are to be at the head, and that is really kind of what it was kind of set up to be. But when you're talking about a household, of course, when you're talking about organizations, I believe that it should be able to be where women can make the same amount as men. But I truly believe we have a very long way to go until that is the case, simply due to the fact that when it comes to things like pay and economic issues, they're all done in secret. So it can always be unfair, but as far as us being equal, no, I don't believe we're equal right now. I believe we have a ways to go before that is the case. Maybe not even in this lifetime.
How do we address the gender gaps in executive careers?
Okay, so addressing the gender gaps means acknowledging that there is a difference first, right? And so we know that, like we just said in the last question, men typically make $100 on the dollar for women. They make way more than women make. So addressing it means not confronting it, but dealing with it as a situation, as it is. So, for instance, it's a myth right now, right, that men make more than women, but we all know that it's really a fact. And so addressing it means to bring it up, to actually say, you know what, this is the situation that we're dealing with. Women don't make as much money as men, but 75% of the women in the U.S. population are more educated than men, or have, they have more education. Men have the brawn and the strength sometimes and the power to lead, but so do women. So I believe that addressing it means to bring it to light, to talk about it, to talk about why it's like it is, and talk about how we can change it, so that rather than just bringing it up, also bringing a solution as to how we can change the gender gap and close that gender gap, maybe even in this lifetime.
Yes, I liked that answer.
Thank you.